everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, my name's Claire and this is Joli. I make videos all about houseplant care, sharing tips and tricks I've learned over the years to help keep your plants happy and healthy. And in today's video, I'm going to be going through everything you need to know about Hoya plants, what they like, what they don't like, and how to resolve any issues you might be having with them. So let's get into it. So I've shown you quite a few of my Hoya plants before, but I've got a few of my current favourites here. This little one is Hoya Australis Lisa, which is just such a beautiful plant. The variegation on those leaves is just absolutely stunning. And then I've got my Hoya Gracilis, which is one of my bigger Hoyas, and again, I just absolutely love it. This one's been surprisingly fast growing. Hoyas can be quite slow, but this one's been quite quick, so yeah, love this one. And then also, and this is one that I have spoken about so much, I've had it for years, this is my Hoya Crinkle 8, which I'm scared to pick up because the pot's a bit wobbly. I've just got it balanced on this at the moment, but is absolutely huge nowadays. So yeah, those I would say right now are probably some of my favorites. There's literally hundreds of species of Hoyas, and although some can be slightly more fussy than others, in my experience their basic care needs tend to be fairly similar, just some are more kind of adaptable and tolerant of certain conditions than others. On the whole, they tend to be really easy, super low maintenance plants, so long as their conditions are right and you're giving them exactly what they need. Because so many Hoyas, such as this Australis, have really thick kind of succulent leaves, it's so easy to assume that these plants will enjoy lots of bright direct light like other succulents, but that is definitely not the case, and I found this out the hard way. I put one of my Hoyas on a south-facing windowsill and it was basically just way too much direct sun and it burnt. It can also stunt their growth because it's just not ideal growing conditions for them. In their natural habitat, these plants actually tend to attach themselves to other plants and kind of grow beneath them, meaning that they're just receiving kind of filtered light from the canopy above. So bright and direct lighting conditions are best for them. If you've only got a really kind of highlight sunny spot for your Hoya, then I would probably recommend either using like a sheer curtain or something like that to kind of create a bit of a filter, or also if you have got other really highlight plants such as succulents or cacti or anything like that, you can actually group them around your plant so that they can kind of mimic its natural conditions and provide a little bit of shade for it that way. A lot of my Hoyas as well are also really happy growing under grow lights. I've got quite a few in my grow light cabinet here, and I've also got quite a lot under grow lights downstairs. So if your house doesn't receive a lot of natural light, then this can be a really good option. If they're not receiving enough light, then you're going to notice their growth slow right down. They're not the fastest growers in the world anyway, so you kind of risk sending them into dormancy if they're not getting enough light. Also, over time, you're probably going to notice them start to look quite kind of stretched out and leggy as opposed to full and bushy and how you want them to look. Also, they are much less likely to flower if they're not getting enough light. Because of the waxy texture to their leaves as well, they do also tend to collect dust quite easily, which firstly is not good because it stops them being able to absorb all the light they need. It also makes them much more prone to pests, and also it just makes your plant look kind of duller, not as healthy, not great. So what I try to do it every time I water. I don't always stick to that, but I would say at least once every few weeks is just go around my plants and just give them a really good dust, a wipe over with either a microfiber cloth, a damp sponge, something like that, just to kind of make sure they are healthy, how they should be, looking good and able to absorb all the light. Lots of Hoyas, particularly the ones that kind of naturally tend to vine and tendril more, such as the Crimson Queen, for example, they tend to chase the light really quite quickly. And if you just kind of leave them in one spot and don't do anything, they'll kind of start to look quite lopsided quite quickly. So a really good thing to do to just help combat this and keep them looking as full as possible is just to rotate their pots on a regular basis so they can absorb equal amounts of light from all angles. I mentioned as well that in their natural habitat, a lot of the time they attach themselves to other plants, and because of this, a lot of people choose to grow them on trellises. You can get some really beautiful trellises nowadays. I was actually looking at one on Etsy last night. It was a really nice hexagon one. But yeah, I personally at the moment just keep most of mine as trailing plants, but trellises are also an option. The most common problems that often arise in Hoyas so often come down to watering. This is also an area where particularly sensitive types of Hoya, such as Hoya Bella, for example, will go downhill pretty fast if you don't get it right. Hoyas tend to be fairly big drinkers, and when I say this, I don't mean that they need their soil to be be consistently damp, because they definitely will not enjoy that. What I mean is that when you do water them, they tend to absorb the water you give them fairly quickly. For example, I only watered this one here a couple of days ago, and feeling it now, the soil, the top layer of soil is completely dried out, which for some other plants it would still be damp, soggy. And I think this is probably where a lot of people go wrong, because they think, the top layer of soil feels dry, I'll go ahead and water again, even though it's only been a few days. And that can lead to issues such as root rot and stuff like that, and your plants will not be happy. I personally let the soil completely dry out each time before I water them again, just to make sure I'm not overdoing it. As I say, root rot is probably the biggest killer in Hoya plants, and often when you notice the signs, it can be too late to save them. So yeah, I will let the soil completely dry out. For this reason as well, it's just a really good idea to monitor the soil instead of sticking to any kind of strict schedule, just to make sure you're actually giving your plants what it needs and not just what you think it needs, if that makes sense. For example, the environment of everybody's homes is going to be so different, and the rate at which the soil dries out varies so much depending on temperature, light, humidity, so many factors. So just because one person is getting away with watering theirs once a week doesn't mean that it will necessarily work for you. The other thing to say on that as well is that obviously at different times of year your Hoya is going to require different amounts of water, because again, things like light, heat, all that stuff. So if you were, for example, to water your Hoya, God, that rain is loud, water your Hoya at the same rates during winter as you were during summer, then chances are you're probably going to cause issues fairly quickly. So yeah, monitor the soil. When you do come to water, if you've got your plant in a pretty pot like this one, then the best thing to do is just take it out of its pretty pot, in its nursery pot. I personally keep all of my plants in their nursery pots just because it makes this so much easier, and then give it a thorough soak through until water kind of pours out of the bottom. Light watering as well is really not great for any plants, I don't think. I don't think light watering is great, just because it doesn't kind of fully target all the root system. So yeah, give it a thorough soak through, allow your plant to properly drain, and then go ahead and pop it back into its pretty pot. The biggest mistake that so many people make is get these pots. I mean, these pots are lovely, they do look nice, but I always just kind of think of them as pot covers, because as you can see, there is literally no drainage at all in there. So the mistake that people make often is either putting your plant straight into a pretty pot like this, or just not taking it out to water, because then water will drain and collect around the roots, cause them to rot and cause issues. During the spring and summer months, it's a really good idea to regularly fertilise your Hoya plants, just to make sure they've got all the nutrients they need in order to support and encourage any new growth. I personally will always fertilise mine pretty much every time I water them over this period, and then completely lay off during the winter months. The exception to this is if you've recently repotted your plant. Assuming you've used a good quality soil, your plant probably won't need to be fertilised for at least the first few months, because it'll be getting all the nutrients it needs from that. When you do come to repot these plants, it's just really important to find something that's firstly well draining, but also retains moisture really well. I personally use a blend of succulent soil, perlite, orchid bark, and sphagnum moss for these ones. However, my little ones here, I have actually mixed quite a lot of pon into the soil, just because I'm kind of thinking that I might transfer all of my Hoyas into just pure pon at some point. This is probably a whole nother video, but I've done it for a load of plants in my grow cabinet, and they're doing so well. If anyone's not quite sure what pon is, it's literally miracle stuff. I have made a video on it, so I will link that video in the description box below. Temperature-wise, Hoya plants tend to do best between 18 and 28 degrees Celsius. They can tolerate slightly lower drops in temperature at night, but ideally that would never be below about 15 degrees. Most plants, including Hoyas, are going to prefer a fairly steady temperature, just meaning that it's not constantly fluctuating up and down too much. They also really do not enjoy cold drafts, as many plants don't, but basically that just means don't put your Hoya plant right next to a drafty door, drafty window, air vent, anything like that, or they will not be happy. They do also really enjoy humidity. They're not the sort of plant that's going to kind of kick up a massive stink if it is slightly lower, like Calatheas, for example. They would not be happy. But I would say for Hoya plants, about 50% is minimum. I personally keep the humidity set to about 65% constantly, just because I've got other plants that are very complainy if it drops below that. But my Hoyas all seem really happy with that. Hoya plants can also be propagated really easily to make new little baby plants. With certain types of Hoya, they can be a little bit more tricky, and I found that the success rate's been higher with some compared to others, but this is kind of just standard for how you do it. So let's find a good bit that I'm going to cut. So for example, you can see this section here. Wow, that rain's loud. So basically you want to make sure that your cutting's got a node, and the node is basically just the point where the leaves meet the stem, that little little bump there, so you want to make sure you cut below that so that that can be submerged in either water or hydro, like if you're choosing to do it. I used to do it in leca a lot. I'm actually going to be doing it in sphagnum moss today, just because I've personally found I've got a higher success rate from doing it that way. But also, if you look on the internode, you'll see these tiny little, let me kind of hold that a bit closer so you can see, those tiny little bumps there. And although they're not where your kind of main root system is going to spring from, they're going to come from the nodes, it's not a bad thing to include them, just because I've known little kind of thread roots come from them before. So all you do, it's very, very simple, is just take a really, really clean pair of scissors. I've sterilized mine with hydrogen peroxide. And then, how big should we make this cutting? I'm going to cut just there. Let me move this a little bit closer so you can see. So that is the node that where the two leaves meet, just there. That's the point where I'm going to cut below, and I'm going to just include quite a lot of this internode here. And there we go. So can you see? And then the best way that I've found, the kind of quickest way to get this done, also make sure you don't get this on your skin. I'm pretty sure Hoya sap contains, it's like latex sap or something, and it can make you very itchy and it's not very good for you. So I'm just going to take a little container and I'm going to fill it with, sorry, that rain is really, really, really loud. Just fill it with some damp sphagnum moss. Oh, you can't really see what I'm doing. There we go. Yeah, fill it up with some damp sphagnum moss. And then I'm just going to pop my cutting in that, making sure that this bit here, the bottom leaf section, the node is kind of fully submerged along with the internode. Some people do actually take the leaves off. I personally have never done that. I mean, I think they run the risk of maybe rotting, but I've personally never experienced that. So, sorry, you can't even see what I'm doing. So I'm not going to do that today. I'm just basically putting the damp moss all around it. And then you can just leave it like this and just make sure that the moss stays nice and moist, and that should start to root fairly quickly. But the best way that I've found is actually either covering it in cling film, or the best method is putting it inside a sealed sandwich bag. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to pop it on a heat mat, make sure the moss is kept clean, because then it just creates a really nice little humid environment for it. And hopefully in the next few weeks we should start to notice some roots appearing. So yeah, I hope that was clear. I feel like that was the least clear part of this video because I didn't adjust my camera, but I really hope that it was. If anybody's got any questions about it, then drop me a comment, I will get back to you. But yeah, I really hope this video was useful. If it was, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.